answered the question. He said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, which is about 17 miles and rugged, very dangerous territory, and a 3,000-foot drop from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And he fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, that was not an uncommon thing in those days, because that strip of road had a lot of caves and places you could slip away and get away, and so it was sort of common for people to be robbed, especially probably at nighttime or whenever it was. And by a chance, a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Now, here's a person who was offering sacrifices and being very religious in the synagogue and so forth. And when he saw this man, half dead, stripped, naked, and he just looked and saw him and just kept going. Scripture says, likewise, a Levite, who was also a person who was responsible for the tabernacle and so forth, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. So now, if I had been the man who asked this question, I'd be getting real uneasy where Jesus was headed. Because here are two religious leaders, people who serve the Lord every day, probably lived down in Jericho somewhere and going back up to Jerusalem to serve. And so both of them, either one of which, should have slipped over and said to the man, what's going on and what can I do to help you? They just looked and kept going. Now, the excuse probably was he's half dead, and if you touched a dead person, you were defiled, and therefore you couldn't do your job in the temple and sanctuary and so forth. And so, whatever the reason, the scripture said they looked and kept going. Now, Jesus had some reasons for placing this here. Then he said, but a Samaritan who was on a journey. Now, the reason this is here is because he probably was an important person. He was on a journey. That is, he was going somewhere. He had a destination, probably had a time limit, whatever it might be. And so when he came upon him, when he saw him, he felt compassion. All three men looked. Two of them kept going. One of them stopped. Two of them just looked, and one stopped. And he came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them, and he put him on his own beast, probably a donkey, and brought him to an inn and took care of him. Now, the other two fellows were the religious guys, and so they just kept going. Here's a man who's hated by the Jews, who goes to the Jew who's about to die, and does so-and-so. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you. Now listen to this. This must have been a very convicting statement. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? And he said,